This 1856 plantation photograph appears normal until you notice the child's matching birthmark. At first glance, it seems like a standard portrait of Southern gentility, a well-dressed woman, her young daughter, their property behind them. Until Dr. Maya Hendricks, curator of Southern material culture at a regional history museum in Jackson, noticed something that made her set down her coffee and reach for a magnifying glass. She had been cataloging a private collection donated by the Whitmore estate, 300 items spanning 5 generations of one of Natchez' oldest families. Most of it was predictable: ledgers, correspondence, silverware inventories. But this particular daguerreotype, housed in a velvet-lined case with a broken clasp, would not let her move on. The photograph shows a white woman in her early 30s, seated in a carved chair on a columned porch. Her dress is dark silk with delicate buttons running up to a high collar. On her lap sits a girl of about 5, blonde ringlets framing a solemn face, wearing a miniature version of her mother's dress. Behind them, slightly to the left, stands another girl. She appears to be 7 or 8. She is black. Her dress is simpler, light-colored cotton, and she holds a white parasol angled to shade the seated figures. Her posture is stiff. Her eyes look directly at the camera. Maya had seen hundreds of photographs like this. The composition was typical of the 1850s South. Wealth displayed through people and objects. The parasol girl was meant to be background, a living accessory demonstrating the family's status. But Maya kept coming back to her face. Then she saw it. Just below the jawline on the left side of the parasol girl's neck, visible because her head is slightly turned, is a birthmark. It is distinctive, roughly the size of a thumbprint, darker than the surrounding skin, shaped like an irregular crescent. Maya zoomed in on the seated child. There, in exactly the same location, barely visible against her pale skin but unmistakable once noticed, is the same mark, the same size, the same shape, the same placement. This is not just a pretty old photo. Something here is wrong. Maya Hendricks had been working with 19th century photographs for 12 years. She had cataloged images from across the Deep South, from New Orleans to Charleston, from plantation records to traveling photographer collections. She had seen the visual language of power repeated endlessly. White families posed with enslaved people positioned as decoration, as proof of wealth, as extensions of furniture. She had trained herself to look past the surface composition, to notice the hands, the eyes, the barely perceptible tensions in posture that revealed what the photographer tried to hide. But she had never seen this. She pulled the daguerreotype from its case with archival gloves and turned it over. On the back, in faded brown ink, someone had written, Mrs. Robert Whitmore and daughter Catherine, Natchez, March, 1856. Below that, in different handwriting, smaller and hurried, studio of J.M. Broussard. No mention of the second girl, not even with servant or with nurse, the euphemisms that sometimes appeared on similar photographs. Maya set up her high-resolution scanner and captured the image at maximum magnification. She pulled up the file on her monitor and moved systematically across every inch. The parasol girl's dress, though simpler, was well-fitted and recently laundered. Her hair was carefully braided and pinned. Her shoes, just visible beneath the hem, were leather, not the rough brogans typically issued to field workers. These were details that suggested house service, personal attendance. But the birthmark kept pulling her back. Identical placement, identical shape. Maya had studied enough genetics, enough medical history to know that birthmarks are not hereditary in any predictable pattern. The odds of 2 unrelated children having matching marks in the same location were astronomical, which meant these girls were not unrelated. She thought about what that meant in Natchez, Mississippi in 1856. She thought about the careful positioning in the photograph. The parasol girl standing behind, slightly apart, her role clearly subordinate. The white child on her mother's lap, centered, the obvious heir. She thought about what it would take to photograph your own children this way. Maya's hands were shaking when she reached for her phone. She needed someone who understood the specific violence of this period, someone who could help her read not just the photograph, but the entire system that made it possible. She called Professor Elijah Trent at Tulane University, a historian who specialized in the legal architecture of slavery in the lower Mississippi Valley. When she sent him the scanned image, he was silent for almost a full minute. "Do you have any estate records?" he finally asked. "Bills of sale? Inventory lists? Anything with names?" Maya spent the next 2 days in the museum's climate-controlled storage, going through every box from the Whitmore donation. She found ledgers tracking cotton yields, correspondence about market prices, household account books listing purchases of fabric, coffee, and lamp oil. She found Catherine Whitmore's childhood commonplace book filled with pressed flowers and copied poetry. Then she found the inventory list from 1851. It was a standard document for the period, the kind probate courts required when estates changed hands. Robert Whitmore's father had died that year, and the property had to be assessed and divided among heirs. The list was meticulous: furniture, livestock, land parcels, enslaved people. Each person was listed by name, approximate age, estimated value, and sometimes a brief physical description. Halfway down the second page, girl, Sarah, about 3 years, light complexion, mark on neck, $400. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. She kept reading. Other names, other ages, other prices. Then at the bottom of the page, in a different hand, a note. Sarah transferred to Robert Whitmore per family arrangement. No sale recorded. She pulled the 1850 census. Robert and Amelia Whitmore, both in their 20s, newly married. One child listed, Catherine, born 1851, 15 enslaved people in residence, valued at just over $10,000 total. Sarah would have been 2 that year, possibly 3, too young to appear separately in the census records, which typically listed enslaved children only by age brackets under 10. She searched for J.M. Broussard, the photographer. He had maintained a studio on Main Street in Natchez from 1854 to 1862, specializing in daguerreotypes and ambrotypes for the city's wealthy families. His advertisements in the Natchez Courier emphasized discretion and artistic composition. He photographed weddings, christenings, and what he called family arrangements. Maya found 3 more Broussard photographs in the Whitmore collection. All featured Catherine at different ages. None included Sarah, except this one. The question forming in Maya's mind felt impossible to hold and impossible to ignore. If Sarah was roughly 3 years older than Catherine, if she was already in the household when Catherine was born, if they had the same birthmark, then who was Sarah's mother? She went back through the estate inventory. No woman of the right age was listed with any notation that might indicate motherhood. But there was something else. In the 1851 transfer note, the phrase family arrangement kept standing out. Maya called Professor Trent again. What does family arrangement mean in this context? It's code, he said quietly. It means the transfer happened within the family, often to avoid public record or to manage inheritance in ways that wouldn't survive legal scrutiny. Sometimes it meant gift transfers between relatives. Sometimes it meant moving people off the books to hide them. Why would they need to hide a 3-year-old? The silence stretched. You're asking the question you already know the answer to, he said. Maya arranged to meet with him in person. She drove to New Orleans with copies of everything she had found. They spread the documents across a seminar table in Trent's office. He put on reading glasses and went through each page methodically. Natchez in the 1850s, he began, was one of the wealthiest cities per capita in the country. The land around it produced more cotton millionaires than anywhere else. Families like the Whitmores were what passed for aristocracy. They had social standing to protect, reputations, marriage alliances, inheritance claims. He tapped the inventory list. This notation, light complexion, is doing a lot of work. It's a marker. It tells anyone reading this document that Sarah's parentage might be complicated, and this transfer, this family arrangement, suggests they were trying to manage something quietly. Maya showed him the photograph. Again, the 2 girls with their matching marks. Here's what I think you found, Trent said. Robert Whitmore had a daughter before he married Amelia. Sarah's mother was almost certainly an enslaved woman in his father's household. When Robert married and started his legitimate family, Sarah became a problem. She was too light, too obviously connected to him. So they did what many families did. They kept her close, dressed her well, gave her house duties, made her part of the domestic scenery. But they also erased her from every official record that mattered. No birth certificate, no acknowledgement of parentage, and when she appeared in photographs, she was positioned as servant, not sister. Why keep her at all? Maya asked. Why not sell her away? Because selling your own child, even when that child is legally your property, crossed a line for some men. It was psychologically easier to keep her nearby, to tell yourself you were providing for her, even as you denied her everything that mattered. And there's another reason. Look at the photograph again. Sarah is holding the parasol. She's attending Catherine. This is a very specific role. Maya understood what he was not quite saying. Companion child. Yes, it was common practice. An enslaved child, usually selected for light skin or family connection, assigned to grow up alongside the white children, playmate when they were young, personal servant as they got older. The bond created was supposed to ensure loyalty. It also gave the white children practice in command, and for families like the Whitmores, it created a buffer. If anyone asked awkward questions about resemblance, they could point to years of close proximity. Of course they looked similar. They grew up together. Trent pulled out a book from his shelf, a collection of slave narratives compiled by the Federal Writers Project in the 1930s. "Listen to this," he said, and read aloud. "My missus, she had a girl they called a shadow girl. Followed her everywhere. Same age, looked almost like kin. We knew what it was, but nobody said it out loud." Maya felt the weight of what they were assembling. This was not just about one photograph. This was about an entire system designed to make children disappear into roles, to turn daughters into property, to photograph them standing behind their own half-siblings and call it normal. "I need to find out what happened to her," Maya said. The trail went cold quickly. After 1860, Sarah's name vanished from the Whitmore household records. No sale documented, no manumission papers, nothing. Maya expanded her search. She went to the Adams County Courthouse in Natchez and requested access to the deed books and probate records. She spent 3 days in a windowless room with a microfilm reader, scrolling through spidery handwriting and legal Latin. She found Robert Whitmore's will, dated 1888. He left the family home and remaining assets to Catherine, by then married with children of her own. Other children mentioned no provision for anyone named Sarah. She tried church records. The Whitmores were Episcopalians, members of Trinity Church on Main Street. The parish registers listed baptisms, marriages, burials. Catherine Whitmore was baptized in 1851. No Sarah. No enslaved people baptized at all during that period, though other churches in Natchez, the African Methodist Episcopal and Baptist congregations, kept their own records. Maya contacted the Natchez Historical Society and asked if they had any records from the black churches that operated before and after the war. A volunteer named Mrs. Loretta Freeman called her back within 2 days. "We have some materials from First Baptist, the black congregation that formed in 1864, she said. "Membership rolls, meeting minutes, some personal testimonies collected by the pastor. You're welcome to come look." The church records were fragmentary, kept in pencil on whatever paper was available during and after the war. But in a membership book dated 1866, Maya found it. Sarah Whitmore Freeman, age 18, received into fellowship by profession of faith, born in bondage, freed by the war, seeking instruction in reading. Freeman. She had taken a new surname, probably from the first person who helped her learn to read, or from the very fact of her freedom. She had kept Whitmore, though, kept that marker of origin, that claim to a family that never claimed her. Maya felt a surge of something between relief and fury. Sarah had survived the war. She had walked away from that house. She had chosen a name, joined a church, learned to read. But what happened between 1856, when she stood holding a parasol behind her half-sister, and 1866, when she signed her name in a church book? She found one more document, tucked into the back of the membership roll. It was a handwritten testimony, 4 pages long, recorded by the church pastor in 1867 as part of a project to document the experiences of newly freed people. Maya's hands trembled as she read. Sister Sarah told us she was born in the Whitmore house, but never knew if her mother was sold off or died. She said she was given to Mrs. Whitmore when she was small and made to serve the daughter, Catherine. She slept on the floor of the nursery. She dressed her and carried her things and never went anywhere without her. She said Mrs. Whitmore sometimes looked at her with hate and sometimes with pity, but never spoke to her unless to give orders. She said when the war came, Mer Whitmore took the family upriver to Louisiana and left most of the people behind to work the land. She said she had to go with them because Catherine wouldn't travel without her. She said they lived in a house in Baton Rouge for 2 years. When the war ended, they came back, but by then the house was almost empty. She said she walked away one morning and nobody stopped her. She said she came to this church because it was the first place she ever heard her name said with kindness. Maya sat in the archive room of the Natchez Historical Society and cried. She thought about that photograph, the careful composition, the way Sarah's face was turned just slightly toward the camera, her eyes meeting the lens. She thought about what it must have cost to stand there, to hold that parasol, to be so close and so erased at the same time. She thought about the matching birthmarks, the evidence written on their bodies that no legal document would acknowledge. She made copies of everything. She wrote up a formal research summary. She prepared a presentation for the museum's curatorial board. Then she requested a meeting. The museum director, a white man in his 60s named Charles Brennan, listened to her findings with a carefully neutral expression. Also present were the head of collections, the chair of the board, and two descendants of the Whitmore family who had been notified because the collection was donated under their name. Maya presented the photograph first, explaining the matching birthmarks. Then she walked them through the documentation, the inventory list, the family arrangement notation, Sarah's absence from official family records, her testimony in the church book. One of the Whitmore descendants, a woman named Patricia Whitmore Hensley, spoke first. "I don't understand what you're implying. You're suggesting that Robert Whitmore, my great-great-grandfather, had a relationship with an enslaved woman and then kept the child as a servant?" "I'm not implying," Maya said carefully. "I'm showing you the documented evidence. The birthmark is biological fact. The records indicate Sarah was transferred within the family under unusual circumstances. Her own testimony states she was made to serve Catherine. These pieces form a clear picture." "A picture you're interpreting through a modern lens," Patricia said. Her voice was tight. "You're taking a few documents and building a story around them that fits a particular narrative. We all know slavery was wrong. We've acknowledged that. But this feels like you're trying to sensationalize our family history for some kind of agenda." The board chair, an older black woman named Dr. Claudia Simmons, spoke up. "Mrs. Hensley, I understand this is difficult, but Dr. Hendricks has done exactly what we hire curators to do. She's researched, documented, and interpreted historical materials. The question before us is not whether this story is uncomfortable. It's whether it's true, and if it is, what our responsibility is in presenting it." Charles Brennan leaned forward. "Let's be practical. This collection was donated with the expectation it would honor the Whitmore family's role in Natchez history. If we reinterpret one photograph to suggest, forgive the bluntness, that Robert Whitmore fathered a child by an enslaved woman and then kept that child as his legitimate daughter's servant, we're going to face significant pushback. The family has already indicated they might request the collection back. We have donor relationships to consider. We also have a mission statement," Maya said, "which commits us to presenting accurate historical narratives, particularly those that have been suppressed or ignored. This photograph has been sitting in archives, cataloged as family portrait, for over a century. Sarah is listed nowhere in the Whitmore family documents except as property. Her own testimony about her life was recorded by a black church and has been essentially invisible to mainstream historical interpretation. If we don't tell this story now that we know it, we're participating in the same erasure that began in 1856. Professor Trent, whom Maya had invited as an expert consultant, added his perspective. "I've studied hundreds of cases like this. Mixed-race children born into slavery, often kept close to white families because selling them was too psychologically difficult for the father, positioned as servants to their own half-siblings. It was a documented pattern. It's in court records, plantation papers, slave narratives, and private correspondence across the South. Dr. Hendricks hasn't invented this pattern. She's identified a specific, well-documented example of it." The meeting lasted 2 hours. The Whitmore descendants argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that the birthmark could be coincidence, that Sarah's testimony was recorded a decade after the events and might be unreliable. The board chair countered that the convergence of evidence, from the inventory notation to the physical resemblance to Sarah's own words, created a standard of proof that historical research could work with. Maya emphasized that they had an obligation not just to the donor family, but to Sarah's descendants, whoever they might be. Finally, Dr. Simmons made a motion. "I propose we move forward with an exhibition that includes this photograph in its full documented history. We present the evidence transparently. We let visitors see the records, hear Sarah's testimony, and draw their own informed conclusions. We also make a good faith effort to locate any living descendants of Sarah Freeman and invite them to participate in the interpretation. The vote was 4 in favor, 3 opposed. The Whitmore descendants abstained. Patricia Hensley spoke quietly as the meeting ended. My family has been generous to this museum for 3 generations. I want you to know that this decision will have consequences. Maya spent the next 6 months building the exhibition. She worked with the designer to create a space that centered the photograph but surrounded it with context. Visitors would enter through a hallway lined with typical plantation portraits, the kind that showed white families in their finery, enslaved people positioned as background. Then they would turn a corner and face the Whitmore photograph, enlarged to 4 feet wide, the matching birthmark circled in red light. Around the main image, Maya arranged the supporting documents under glass. The inventory, list with Sarah's name. The family arrangement notation, the census records showing the household, the church membership book, Sarah's testimony, typed out in large, readable text. She also included context panels explaining the broader practice. One panel detailed the legal architecture that made it possible for men to own their own children. Another explained the role of companion children in wealthy households. A third presented excerpts from other slave narratives describing similar situations. A fourth outlined what happened to these families after emancipation, how some black families kept white surnames as claims to kinship, even when that kinship was never officially recognized. The hardest part was finding Sarah's descendants. Maya worked with a genealogist who specialized in tracing black family lines through the fragmentary records of slavery and Reconstruction. They tracked Sarah Freeman through church records and city directories. She had married in 1871, a man named Thomas Freeman who worked as a carpenter. They had 3 children, 2 daughters, and a son. The family stayed in Natchez through the 1880s, then moved to Memphis during the Great Migration. The genealogist found a living great-great-granddaughter named Angela Freeman Russell, a retired teacher living in Memphis. When Maya called her and explained what she had found, there was a long silence. "We always knew," Angela finally said. "It was passed down but never talked about openly, you know. My grandmother said her grandmother had been born in a big house in Natchez, that her father was the man who owned her mother, that she was made to serve his white children. We knew the name Whitmore, but there was never any proof, just family stories." Angela agreed to come to Natchez for the exhibition opening. She brought her daughter and her granddaughter. The 3 generations of Sarah's descendants stood in front of the photograph, staring at a woman they had heard about but never seen. "She was beautiful," Angela's daughter whispered. "She was a child," Angela said. "She was 8 years old in this picture, and she was holding a parasol over her own sister, and nobody thought it was wrong." The exhibition opened on a humid Saturday in October. Over 200 people attended. Local news covered it. The story was picked up by regional papers, then national outlets. The Whitmore descendants issued a statement saying they disagreed with the interpretation but respected the museum's mission. Patricia Hensley did not attend. But Angela Freeman Russell stood in front of the photograph and spoke to a crowded gallery. She talked about what it meant to see proof of something her family had always carried as painful knowledge. She talked about Sarah's testimony, about her courage in walking away, about building a life after freedom. She talked about the generations that followed and how they carried Sarah's strength even when they could not carry her full story. Maya watched from the side of the room. She thought about the moment she first noticed the matching birthmarks, the way that tiny detail had opened into this vast landscape of violence and survival. She thought about how many other photographs might hold similar secrets, if only someone looked closely enough. In the weeks after the opening, other researchers and curators began reaching out. They sent images from their own collections, a photograph from Virginia showing a white girl and her black companion with the same unusual eye color. A portrait from South Carolina where a boy stood behind his supposed half-uncle with the same distinctive chin. A daguerreotype from Louisiana where careful magnification revealed that an enslaved woman and the plantation mistress were wearing matching lockets. Each image represented a story someone had tried to bury. Each one required the same patient work of excavation, the same willingness to see what the original photographer tried to hide in plain sight. 6 months after the exhibition opened, Maya received a letter from a woman in North Carolina. Her name was Ellen Whitmore Patterson. She was Patricia Hensley's cousin. She wrote that she had visited the exhibition alone after the initial controversy died down. She had stood in front of Sarah's testimony for a long time. Then she had gone home and searched her own family papers. She found a box of letters between Robert Whitmore and his sister dated from the 1850s and 1860s. In one letter, dated 1857, Robert had written, "You ask about the arrangement we made. It is managed. Sarah is with Amelia and Catherine and serves well enough. Amelia does not speak of it, which is for the best. I tell myself I've done better than most men in my position. She is fed, clothed, and safe under our roof. But I confess there are nights I cannot look at her without feeling something I have no words for." Ellen included a photocopy of the letter with her note to Maya. She wrote, "I think you were right. I think we owe it to Sarah to tell the truth. I would like to donate these letters to your collection if you think they would help." Maya added the letter to the exhibition. She placed it directly below Sarah's testimony. Two voices, speaking across a century and a chasm of power, both trying in their own ways to articulate something almost too awful to name. The photograph remains the centerpiece. When visitors approach it now, they see more than a staged portrait of antebellum gentility. They see two girls marked by biology, divided by law. They see the particular cruelty of making someone serve their own sibling. They see the system that required Sarah to stand just far enough away to be property, but close enough to be useful. And they see the evidence of resistance in Sarah's eyes, the way she looked directly at the camera, the way she survived long enough to tell her story in her own words. Maya often thinks about how many family albums contain photographs like this one, how many portraits show people in the background, relegated to the margins of the frame, who were in fact central to the family in ways that could never be acknowledged. How many matching features, similar expressions, genetic signatures are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice. Old photographs are not neutral documents, they are choices. Someone decided where to position each person, what to include in the frame, what story to tell. For every carefully composed image of Southern wealth and respectability, there is a counter-narrative written in the details. The placement of hands, the direction of a gaze, the objects people hold, the marks on their bodies. Sarah Whitmore Freeman lived for 57 years after that photograph was taken. She learned to read, she married, she raised children, she gave testimony, she chose her own name. The system that tried to erase her succeeded in removing her from official family records, from legal inheritance, from the historical record that validated Catherine's life while rendering Sarah's invisible. But it could not erase the birthmark. It could not erase the photograph. And it could not, in the end, erase Sarah's voice. Every time someone notices that tiny crescent-shaped mark on two young necks, every time they ask what it means, they pull Sarah back from the margin to the center. They acknowledge what Robert Whitmore could not. They see what Amelia Whitmore refused to see. They restore to Sarah what the camera tried to take, what the legal system denied, what the archive almost succeeded in burying. They see her, not as property, not as servant, not as the shadow figure behind her half-sister's chair, but as a daughter, as a person, as someone whose story, against every force that tried to silence it, survived.